So, in today's episode, or the first episode of Making Lemonade podcast, trademark, we're going to be talking to entrepreneur, world record holder, TEDx speaker, best-selling author, amazing inventor, ex-Royal Marines Commando, and you know, genuinely the nicest, or one of the nicest guys I've ever had the pleasure to meet, Richard Browning. So for those of you who do not know who Richard Browning is, he is the brains behind the human propulsion technology startup Gravity Industries. So Richard invented, designed and patented and launched the Iron Man style jet suits that you may or may not have seen flying around Top Gear tracks and off Royal Navy warships and everything all over YouTube. Richard founded Gravity Industries way back in 2017. So this is off the back of a very successful career working in the city, where he created game-changing innovations within his role as a oil trader, where he spent 16 years there. After this, he found reignited his family passion for inventing and aeronautical engineering. He's an ex-Royal Marine, which is really good for us. And he cites his, I suppose, the inspiration and the kind of vision behind Gravity Industries is coming from his father, who is Michael Browning. Now, Michael was an aeronautical engineer and like a rogue maverick inventor who tragically lost his life when Richard was only a teenager. Really, I wanted to reach out to Richard after seeing him initially on LinkedIn. To be fair, I came across him. I think we were in mutual groups. Obviously, being veterans and being part of the same organisation. I took a keen interest in what he was doing, and I started to see all of this amazing stuff in the press. Started to see it on the video here, there, and everywhere. And I reached out to him. I thought, do you know what? If anyone can sum up what it means to be an entrepreneur, what it means to kind of overcome obstacles and really apply the stuff that you learn, not just in Civvy Street, but also in the core as well, and applying that to how we look at the business world now. This guy is going to be it, and I think that a lot of people are really going to enjoy hearing about what he has to say, and can really relate, because I think we tend to see these amazing people do absolutely amazing things, and we tend to forget that they are people as well, and they've had the same amount of time as we have, and they have the same dreams and the same challenges as we have as well, and we overcome them. So we talk about his journey so far, his time in the Corps, some of the challenges that he's really faced, where he kind of sees the company going, where he sees his motivation behind Gravity, and kind of what happens next. If you're really interested in finding out a little bit more about Richard, then I highly recommend getting his book. So it's called Taking on Gravity, and it is a guide to inventing the impossible from the man who learned to fly. And that is available at all good bookshops, and I think it's I think it's an Amazon bestseller as well. So really good, a real good read. Also check out his social media as well. So he's on Instagram, he's on LinkedIn, he's on Facebook, Twitter, and of course, that amazing YouTube channel that he's got. But yeah, it should be really good. Stay tuned. We'll have a debrief afterwards as well. Thanks.
Richard Browning, you are a 2 times world record holder.
Yes, I believe so.
You are an entrepreneur, being deemed the modern day Iron Man by people like Wired and in the media, and you're all over the world, literally, flying around, which is great. Not a lot of people know about your military history, though. So what I really want to do is just maybe get yourself to introduce yourself, speak about some of the experiences that you had when you were working in the Marines, and kind of go from there, really.
Sure, thanks, Gaz. It's a pleasure to be on. My background, or rather my title, I am Richard Browning. I am the founder and chief test pilot from Gravity, and we build and fly 1,000 horsepower jet suits. Yeah, that's pretty much a good summary.
Good. Okay then. So the reason behind these this kind of series of podcasts, or this series of interviews, is to kind of explore the role that veterans play within the business world, really. Quite a lot of times we come across veterans in 2 markets, and those markets are usually teaching and security, and not a lot else. But I really wanted to understand a little bit more about your experience within the forces, within the military organisations, and kind of what you've been doing, really. So you used to be a Royal Marine?
Yeah, I was RMR London, so I was a Royal Marine Reservist alongside a pretty mad day job. I was an oil trader for BP for 16 years in the city. But if I wind it back, I went to university with a place at Sandhurst, as in, I'd already gone through, the RCB, Regular Commissions Board at the time, and had a place to join the army. I mean, cutting to the chase, I lost my father when I was 15. He took his own life. It was a bit, there's so many examples, especially in military circles, of people having challenging childhoods and turned that into something of a motivation, I guess. And I've always respected what the forces represents, the UK forces in particular, and that was my ambition. But during university, I spent an awful lot of time in the Officer Training Corps, also an awful lot of time on Senny Bridge. I was at Cardiff University. I met my now wife at university, and then started to think, well, maybe I should go and try and find some kind of civilian job when I leave, rather than rush off to Sandhurst. Knew I'd always regret it. I always try and probably achieve a little bit more than is feasible in life in some ways. And knew I'd always regret it. Joined BP. Did start to earn some good money, which is something I did want to achieve because of my my childhood was a bit rocky, let's put it that way, and I wanted to build a solid financial basis, for my family that I didn't have yet. But I've got 2 boys who are now early teens. But cut long story short, I joined the Royal Marines Reserve when I was probably about 4, maybe 3 years into my career with BP, because as I predicted, I regretted not joining the forces and scratching that itch. And the RMR looked like a really good, interesting challenge. I highly respected the concept of rather than the territorial army, where you're a separate unit, which doesn't maybe tend to get used as much as you'd wish. I liked the idea that you had to achieve the same standards to get your green lid, and then be kind of backfill manpower boost in the field. And I thought that was an admirable setup. So yeah, merrily jumped in, and like we've all experienced, probably a lot of people listening to this, it dawns on you very quickly what you've now gone and committed to, and think, oh my god, I can't let myself down. We've all been there, and then you think, I can't possibly now give this up. Damn, I've got to get my ass over the line. And gosh, it was hard work. I mean, I'm not at all saying it's easy going living in Livingston for a year, but at least you're in the zone and you're surrounded by oppos who are doing the same horrible stuff. Whereas
Yeah.
you're like constantly dipped. I mean, again, I'm not trying to suggest the RMR is the hardest thing in the world, but being, Friday night, you've done a really hard, 14-hour day or something, and instead of getting off the train at home, you're getting off the train in Bermondsey, is where it used to be. That's bad enough. But then packing your kit in that, I can still smell what that changing room is like. It's sort of plasticky smell with the artificial bright lights, and you're packing your Bergen, thinking I'm not going to sleep again for until Sunday night, and it's going to be grim. I'm going to stand up to my chin in water and be shouted and screamed at alongside Goldman Sachs, new graduate, bin men, unemployed guy, secret guy from MI6 who we knew he was from there, but you'd never say he was. It's a wonderful melting pot of wonderful characters, and we're all just thinking, why are we doing this? This is like the mother of all type 2 fun. But you know what? You get to the end of Sunday, and then you'd be back sitting in a warm, desk on Monday morning, unable to use your hands still, thinking, well, maybe I'll go back the next time, and I had like 3 years of that. To get my green lid, and I screwed up the commando course at least. I think I'm embarrassed. I don't usually end up covering this, but I screwed it up twice. First time I tore my pectoral muscle attachment jumping through that damn cargo net. I just got the arm angle wrong and did some stupid I'm a teapot motion, and I'm not a teapot, and my arm nearly came off. Got healed, but didn't really have my head in the right place and tried to rush through thinking I was there. I've got to catch up with my, small number of mates who've made it through. We started with a group of 80, and me and one other got through 3 years later. Anyway, and I rushed it and upset too many people and got kicked off the course. And then made it through a third time in a row. But I tell you what, the mental challenge of trying to drag my ass back to that to get my damn lid. Oh my God. Anyway, so yeah, there you go. That was a long answer to that question, but yeah, I didn't. It was a journey, but I'm very proud of what I managed to achieve by getting there in the end. But yeah, tricky.
Yeah, and it's important. I think it's important to know that if you fail, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's it then for you, is it? It means that you've just got that other excuse to try and get back on. And,
yes, but it was probably still one of the hardest things I've done in life, which is to drag yourself back to get. I mean, thing is, there's so many Royal Marines who, probably some of the best Royal Marines who got back troops, injured, for whatever reason, and the mental fortitude of picking yourself back up, surrounded by a different bunch of mates this time, and still getting through it. My God, is that hard? So many of the guys I train with dropped by the wayside over the years, usually from just their life changing, like they got a girlfriend and moved somewhere, or job moved, or they got injured. I mean, I'm always in deep admiration of the Royal Marines for putting so much demands on you. 1 minute you've got to be a pretty handy 10K runner. The next minute you've got to be a gym monkey and bang out those damn pull-ups. The next minute you've got to be, more like a sort of expedition leader in terms of yomping across, Dartmoor, doing something like, carrying a load of wet kit for hours. They're all such a diversity, you know this, right? They're all such a diversity of demands on your body that they really do find the weak point. I'm pretty good at gym stuff. I'm pretty good runner. I'm pretty good at hauling extra weight, but I'm not very good at shutting the hell up when I'm supposed to, because, my day job was being a cheeky oil trader of trying to constantly bend the rules. So when I'm told to go and sit there staring into the blackness when I know there'd be a better option over somewhere else, that was my weakness. I'd be a cheeky bastard. That was just, wasn't very good at shutting up. And then the Marines are pretty good at entertaining alternative viewpoints. You're not supposed to be a mindless automaton. You're a thinking man soldier, right? But I probably stretched that tolerance somewhat further than I should have done. Hell, I run a jet suit business. You'd imagine I would. So anyway, I loved it. My biggest regret though. So I spent then quite a bit of time, just doing RMR stuff. But then Optelic, whatever it was, I don't remember the number, started to come around. My biggest regret in life, and you're always going to hit an obstacle at some point. But my biggest regret was the point when I was supposed to go and do that with a couple of mates who I'd known throughout the whole journey. They didn't even have steady girlfriends, I don't think, or regular girlfriends. Let's put it that way. I was married and had a son on the way, and I literally felt, I was faced with the horrible challenge of, do I literally say to my wife, right, I'm gonna bugger off to Afghanistan for 9 months or whatever, whilst you go and have our first son with none of your family support around you because they weren't in London, or do I stay back and do that? And I think I made the right decision, but I would have very much liked to have gone out there and rounded off my experience with joining my colleagues out there. And to be fair as well, it wasn't the ultra kinetic initial phase nor the horrendous IED latter phases. It was I don't know how to put it really, but from the catching up with my buddies who did go, it was the relatively sensible infantry mid phase where, yes, they lost a couple of lads, but it was relatively what everybody was designed to go and do, endless yomping around, getting shot at, waiting for the fast air to come in and make the shooting go quiet, which I'm just trying to paint a picture, that
technical term there.
yeah. Well, what I'm trying to say is, it wasn't, I don't think statistically, I didn't dodge some very high likelihood of losing some limb or it would have been a fairly reasonable tour to go on. And I just to this day wish I could have gone and done that, but very, 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 very much not the case of me running away from the commitment of doing that. It was purely just the guilt trip of the family. So anyway, that was my story. And actually, you know what? It's a massive part of the motivation. I say this on every talk, and I think a lot of the talks I do, they don't really get it necessarily, but I'm sure this audience will. But the deep admiration that I came away from my time with the Marines around human capability, isn't it nuts what you can train your mind and body to get through? Everybody who's got a green beret has been through that journey to go, holy shit, I got through more than I probably imagined I necessarily could have done. Well, that was part of the motivation of believing that you could attach 1,000 horsepower of jet power to yourself and learn to fly. I think most sensible engineers would have discounted it, but I had more than just an engineering perspective. I had I think you can do a lot with the body. And that's a large part of the journey. And we've since gone on, and our biggest, deepest military relationship is with the Royal Marines and the Royal Navy, amongst many others around the world. But that's going great guns at the moment.
And it's branched, of course, out into rescue as well. So don't you deal quite a bit with mountain rescue and airborne paramedics? And...
Yes, we've done quite a bit with them. So I mean, the story there started with the Great North Air Ambulance reaching out and saying they thought they had a role for us to occupy around first response. So imagine somebody stuck in the mountains. You drive a Land Rover up. Usually the Land Rover, the 4x4s are usually the quickest to get there. You can have several of those scattered around, drive up through the valleys, get to where the road runs out, and you're probably, as the crow flies, only a couple of K at most from pretty much anywhere you need to get to. All of this is quicker, cheaper, more agile, and more useful than a helicopter, because helicopters can get right near you if they can find you. Once they think they found you, what the hell do they do? Fast roping medics onto mountainsides is not really a fun pastime, and even then, great. How do you get the casualty back up again? There's a whole bunch of challenges there. So they said if they could drive up close to the casualty and do the last couple of K really quick over any terrain and get first response, quite similar to a military casualty situation, they thought it had a place. So we went up there, and we had a wonderful couple of days, amazing weather, which wasn't very Lake District at all. It was all sunny and still and brilliant. But if you go to Gravity Industries YouTube, you can see the paramedic film on there. And we got to the casualty. It was a mock casualty, but we got to her within 90 seconds when it took 20-25 minutes to walk there. So that's gone brilliantly.
It's amazing, really. So I'm curious. It's the question that you'll get asked loads and loads of times. What made you think, other than, wow, this is going to be a jet suit and let's just do it, you've just got to roll the dice, but what made you think this is going to be how I'm going to define myself? This is going to be the next big thing?
Well, I didn't know any of those things. I genuinely embarked on this journey. It was some years after I'd left the Royal Marines. It was 16 years into a corporate career. I have always loved pushing boundaries, challenging myself. I got into triathlons. I ran ultramarathons. I obviously had the time in the Royal Marines. I'd set up a little business alongside my day job, which had sort of taught me a lot of lessons. But, I built a successful career as a trader. I'd had a lot of interesting wins in the corporate world. Sounds very kind of PowerPointy, doesn't it? But I mean, I'd actually accidentally discovered something that really changed how commodity trading worked about ship tracking. You know, Gaz, you mentioned about maritime security. So I bet you know what AIS is, or automatic identification system is. Yeah, right. So the little dot on a map showing where ships are. Well, I discovered that. Somebody else had built it around the world, but I discovered it from a corporate point of view, commercial point of view, and realized that it could tell us where all the ship-borne trade flows were going before anybody in the trading world realized. That discovery turned into an idea that I borrowed 20 grand off BP at the time, and it turned into something that made us about $500 million about 9 months later. It gave us a window where we could go and essentially use a crystal ball to prejudge where all the world's trade flows were moving. So for some of the ships you probably landed on or sat on whilst you were going through the tricky areas, were carrying things that if we knew they were going into Europe rather than into Singapore and into the Far East, if we knew that that was gasoline or let's say jet fuel or something, that would shift the market 2 weeks later. So we could suddenly predict all that. The buzz you get from seeing an opportunity and dragging it over the line and suddenly proving all the naysayers wrong is quite compelling. And you've got to get used to, though, 20 or 19 times out of 20, that being wrong and that the naysayers were right. If you can survive that enough, then every now and then the hit you get from the high you get from proving them wrong and doing something people thought was impossible becomes quite addictive. And so the journey with gravity was just a very public version of the same thing, really. It was just this idea of could you marry together human balance and physicality with a little bit of horsepower and fly in a completely bonkers, unheard of, supposed to be impossible way? No commercial reason whatsoever. I just thought it'd be a cool challenge. And it turns out you can. And then the bigger challenge became how do you turn that into a self-sustaining, successful business? And there's a whole other story around that, really.
I think the thing that often gets me, particularly with ex-Bootnecks and obviously the wider veteran community, that resilience piece, that thing, well, listen, it hasn't worked out this time, but next time it might. And there's that fine line between, I don't know, like my wife often says, you're just stubborn, you're not just trying to do this over and over again. And sometimes she's right, though. But obviously, resilience is one of the biggest things that makes people successful.
Let me talk to the resilience thing though, right? Because it's massively important in trying to strike out and do anything, build your own business, be an entrepreneur, design something, invent something, or even be just successful in a commercial job or any job really in the corporate world. Unfortunately, most of the resilience is handy from the point of view of putting up with corporate bullshit and probably a boss you don't really enjoy working with, but hey, it's still resilience. But look, when you're an entrepreneur or inventor or whatever, you want to set up your own business, resilience is really important. But I would say to a mostly maybe veteran audience, there is a massive caveat here, right? And the resilience thing can get you in a lot of trouble. When you're a trader, you have to have a lot of resilience to stick to your guns, believe in your strategy, ride the losses, and come through a hero when your position makes you millions of dollars. Yeah, great. That's part of it. But a big part of it is realizing on day 2, when all the conditions outside have changed, and to your horror, your strategy is falling apart. And you've got to pivot. You've got to drop it. You've got to cut your losses, unemotionally disengage, and come up with a new strategy. How the hell can you reconcile those two bedfellows? They are two entirely different things. And I think something is probably more useful to talk about when you've got to pivot to a veteran audience than just sticking to your guns and muscling it out. I suspect this audience, you guys are better at that bit. It's whenever you've got to just drop it and go and shift direction. That's harder, right? That's as important. And there's no book that's going to tell you when to shift from one to the other. All I would say is 1 minute, never give up, never say die, get to the top of that mountain, nothing's going to stop you. And then in the same breath go, but hang on, let's just imagine I'm some miserable skeptic outside. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? Is it really valuable? I know my mum and everybody around me thinks it's a brilliant idea, but really, are they just telling me what I want to hear? What could go wrong? Is this the right thing? Is there something better I could be doing? And should I cut my losses now? Can I survive this all failing?
I'm glad that you said that as well, because there's a bit of a culture in the military, isn't there, of just man up, just grit your teeth and crack on. But yeah, you just need to know when to pivot, when to stop, really. So like I use red flags. So I have like imaginary flags in my head that will flash up at certain points when I'm like, do you know what? Is this really going to work? Like, and that could be money, it could be how much time that I've spent doing something like that. How do you get by? How do you know when to turn?
As I say, there's no real kind of perfect solution to this. I would say, you've got to be your own worst critic. If you're constantly getting dragged in front of the media or in front of investors or your colleagues, and they constantly are looking to you to wave not a red flag but a green flag and say how brilliant it is and it's going to go great and we're going to ride through this and it's going to be excellent, be wary that you're also going to be in danger of convincing yourself and believing your own bullshit. I had to have a lot of resilience and belief that this was going to work in the early days, because I was venturing down a road that didn't exist, right? I mean, what mad person ever thinks this would even work, let alone become a business? So I had to constantly challenge myself and going, look, what can I do at every stage if this doesn't work out? How can I pivot this? I mean, could I even just do some fun videos online that can make a bit of money, sticking jet engines on my kids' bikes and stuff, and just sort of pivot this? Could I you've got to constantly be adaptive. So I just think you've got to be your own worst critic. Don't just reside in high-fiving, whooping, this is all going to be brilliant, we're going to get there. To be honest, I think you can draw parallels with military scenarios as well. How many military exercises you've been on where your objective is X, and actually it just gets too bogged down, it becomes infeasible. I mean, to be honest, most real life contacts turn into, or real life missions where the bad guys aren't just the friendlies, with different color hats on. Actually they usually go to bollocks, and it's a question of salvaging something out of a disaster, right? So a bit like scenario planning where things can go wrong, I think you've got to do the same from a business point of view. You've got to imagine the unimaginable. Most things will go wrong when you set up a business, and you've got to have the adaptability and the resilience to be able to pivot and adjust. And I think that's really important.
I think a mantra of mine, and I certainly tell everybody who's willing to hear it, a plan only survives its first point of contact.
Always.
And that is it. Like, you can plan for the next 12 years, but as soon as you run into something, or as soon as something happens, then you have to think of it all over again. So it's all about planning for it to go wrong, right? And having certain goal milestones.
And also kind of having a culture, if you like, of you, your team, whatever, of adaptability. So, I mean, we did 111 events in 33 countries before COVID struck. We were making 100 grand an event in some cases, right? Turn up 3 days, become a national hero on TV in Japan, and walk away with $100,000. I mean, what a business model, yeah? Quite stressful to execute it, but I mean, and then suddenly overnight that stops. Were we that bothered? Not really. We're massively adaptive. We started printing COVID masks on the 3D printer that's still whirring away, sitting over there. We realized that social media was becoming a massive thing. We were big anyway, but we grew exponentially. We just hit 1 million followers on TikTok, for all things. I mean, we've made probably 50 grand out of social media in the last months. It's ridiculous, right? Who would have ever thought of that? But we weren't phased at all. We just adapted. We just looked for new opportunities and drop other ones. We have this kind of belief that we're willing to almost try anything if it passes the test of, if it goes wrong, can we get back up again? Have we invested too much money in only one thing? No. So if it fails, are we really that bothered? No. Be massively adaptive and flexible. And so when the unimaginable, like COVID, happens, just see new opportunities.
Exactly. It's just, being adaptive, improvise, adapt, and overcome the situations that happen.
It's a very good mantra.
A lot of veterans and a lot of entrepreneurs constantly go back to stoicism and
absolutely. A miserable, dry British sense of humour. Usually, when you're wet through and feeling miserable, wondering why you're doing it, that is very good to fall back on.
Yeah. And obviously, having gone through those miserable, wet, horrible late nights, I tell you what, there's no better feeling of putting it into context. Whenever I'm looking outside or feeling a little bit cold or wet, I think there is some nod somewhere on Dartmoor. for 30 hours in a gorse bush.
Yeah, somewhere. Yes, indeed. Yeah.
No. Oh, great. So in terms of like, I suppose what the future kind of holds for you, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, where are we now? We are going to celebrate our 4th anniversary, believe it or not, as a company in April. As I said, 111 events, 33 countries, built an amazing awareness around the world consistently. We just had it today. I mean, 2 of the 3 BBC people who are here today had seen it before, loved it again, but the 3rd girl, I mean, she hadn't seen it. Same reaction. People just lose their minds seeing this live. It's like almost an autistic reaction, and people can't compute what they're seeing. So we've done that live to several million people around the world who want to see more, whether it's coming and training with us in LA or haven't been there for a bit, but LA or Goodwood, the estate there. We train lots of clients and training for quite a few military people there as well. That's all going very well. Rebuilding the race series, or I suppose reigniting the race series, is something when we're all allowed to travel and get out again. Who knows how that's going to take? I don't know. But actually, if I'm really honest, and I don't say this to many interviewers because some people aren't too down with the whole military thing, but I'm so excited about the military stuff. We've got so many exercises coming up. We're operating off a pretty big ship. I'm going to stop myself from saying too much at the moment. A pretty big ship for quite some days to really embed the maritime assault boarding role of what we do. Again, quite a lot of this is on the Gravity Industries YouTube already, but you imagine that with 3 pilots repeatedly proving how we can both integrate with the boarding team, but also go beyond that and sort of prove in the politest possible way why you don't need boats and hooks and helicopters or any of those quite as much as you think you do, because we can do a lot of that really well. But we've got to prove it, and we're going to formally be proving it in a few weeks' time with some really quite exciting new kit. We're doing the same with an allied nation not too far away, and another one a little bit further away in Europe. I'm itching to say who they are, but lots of European allies, and also lots of US allies as well, US units. We even, during lockdown, got whisked away with our 7.5-ton truck in the back of a C-17 to an allied Middle Eastern nation to go and do some training out there, which was bonkers. I mean, getting airlifted was insane. So the military stuff is great. And again, if I put a cold commercial hat on, actually, I mean, I'm sure you and your audience and me, we all love this stuff because it operationally is just awesome. I mean, you are genuinely be able to bring the magic you can bring to a tactical bound. This is not flying around with guns blazing. This is a tactical bound, but the tactical bound can be 0 to 60 miles an hour in a second over any terrain and immediately down to any position you like. You wait till you see what's going on Top Gear in March. I raced Freddie Flintoff in his Formula E whatever it was, Extreme E rally car, and blazed my way through little tiny wooded pathways over lakes through marshland in a way no other vehicle can on this planet. And I did a mile in 2 minutes through like complete off-road and smashed the rally car. I did have to go a slightly different route, but it was just ridiculous. If you now change that from being a silly stunt for TV into I need to get an OP on that mountaintop or get behind that machine gun position ASAP, and those 2 Royal Marines can put on a piece of kit that within 10 seconds can get them airborne, and within another 90 seconds, 180 seconds can get to that hilltop, 120 seconds, I can't do my maths. There's nothing that can touch it, but we've got to prove all this, right? It's such a ridiculous capability. We've got to prove it by doing. I love all this stuff, but actually when we're allowed to leak little bits of that into the mainstream public, when little bits of this leak out to the mainstream public, their minds explode and they just think Iron Man, Tony Stark. I mean, I showed you. Look, I'm going to mess up the your recording now, but look behind. There's a 3D print. Look at that evil stuff sitting over there. All of that stuff is real and allows you to properly fly, increasingly like they see in the film. So what's magic is that it's. Tactically, I firmly believe this, and we're on a great pathway now, genuinely applicable and useful and operationally powerful in a bunch of bunch of uses, and search and rescue and CASEVAC, not so much CASEVAC, but first response. But actually, there's really accessible money in the world of, social media and filmmaking and brand launching or whatever. But the whole world is tantalized and enthralled by watching us go and do stuff that's real, meaningful, and authentic in your old world. So it's a great mixture. It's really fun.
it certainly sounds absolutely amazing, and it's like it's the future, isn't it? Like if you told me that, oh, by the way, like Royal Marine Commandos are going to be flying around in jet suits, of
It's
all
bonkers,
things.
right? I mean, it's
Absolutely
almost so bonkers. I know it sounds way too movie-ish, but actually, I met the first Sea Lord when we were on the aircraft carrier off the coast of Washington when I went out to sort of terrify all the DoD visitors. I mean, he was fully on, he's fully on board with it. I mean, again, I'm not going to formally quote him, but it is great to see the open-mindedness, particularly in the Royal Marines. They are thinking quite expansively, and if you just cast your mind back to pre-Vietnam. I'd love to have been in the room when the senior military leaders had somebody walk in the room and say, look, we've got these funny things called helicopters. We use them a bit in Korea. Looks a bit gawky and a bit geeky, and we've used them for resupply and a bit of observation. But I reckon you could probably put guns on these things, and you could probably put like 8 blokes and drop them anywhere in this jungle in this really tricky theater called Vietnam. You don't have to parachute them in and get them stuck in trees. They don't have to yomp in, all this sort of stuff. There would have been people in the room going, what? I don't get that. No, full infantry all the way through the jungle. We'll start from here and walk all the way through. I mean, that was a capability that seemed miraculous and magical, and yet completely revolutionized the battlefield and has done ever since. We are not in that scale of impact, right? I want to be clear. But in a little way, it's the same mind-boggling. There's no brain space to imagine what we can do. When you said, at the beginning of this, Gareth, we were chatting, you used to do maritime security. I'm guessing in some circumstances you either got, embarked at port, or you got shuttled, or you did a horrible, underway, climb a ladder, or maybe if you had the luxury of a helicopter and you were being helicoptered between ships. Well,
Definitely.
You could just fly. You could just fly between them now. It's effortless. It's really easy. Even in that world, this could be, useful.
Well, I was thinking back as you were talking about going between ships. When we were in, because I worked with SMSG, as I said, we were doing maritime counter-terrorism. And this involved essentially putting a rickety caving ladder, attaching that to a ship, and then just try. You've got there, haven't you?
What? One of these?
Yeah,
I've got a few of these.
Oh, yeah. Just climbing up like that, and you're like, oh my god. And of course, when you get to the top of the ship, because it kind of like goes convex, you've got nothing to hold on to. Like, and you're carrying all of that kit. So
that's the world we're playing in. So we're both supporting that role by flying ahead and putting in place the ladders, but also it's been noticed that we maybe don't need the ladders either. So hello.
You've got to
hello.
It's Richards. Yeah. Thanks. Can you go downstairs?
The joys of home working, and I must go and see mine, who's slightly older now. But I must go and see mine in a minute.
Oh,
anyway,
good.
so we've got a lot of exciting stuff coming up as well, and we're even hoping to do something with Invictus as well, because I think it'd be a pretty cool thing to give back a whole kind of mad degree of mobility to some folks who have lost a bit of mobility. That could be quite a fun thing to go and do as well for them. We've skirted around that a bit up till now, but I think the opportunity is coming up with Invictus. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think I think you're right there. Just with innovation, you mentioned there about helicopters. Yeah, like, and I think that the Royal Marines in particular is very good at being open-minded. I mean, you're talking about helicopters there. We're talking about, I forget when it was, but you remember those bootnecks who strapped themselves onto Apaches?
Yeah, that came up in conversation. That came up in conversation recently. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's not to be recommended, but yeah, that degree of mobility, I'm now very willing to bet, and I've never really said this in anything other than sort of one-to-one conversations, but I'm willing to bet we can properly rewrite some of the rule book. And I am most excited about exercises like Black Alligator on the west coast of the US, where the Royal Marines sort of fight the USMC, and it all gets a bit dirty. I am very excited about supporting a red team effort in a way that is going to blow a few people's minds. That's going to be fun.
I can't wait to see that. But no, thank you very much once more for coming on, Richard.
No worries.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Cool, guys.
and I'll let you crack on with your family
Cool.
walk. Cheers.
Your family too.
Yeah. Hey. So how did that go?
Really good. Yeah. It was a bit of a weird time when we actually did the podcast. So like, transparency and everything like that. It was mid-second lockdown in the UK. And I think everybody's mental health goes a bit wrong during those lockdowns, doesn't it? And I think I was a little bit taken aback and almost, starstruck, as this was like the very first episode of the very first podcast that I've ever done, and I managed to get a superstar like Richard coming in. But you know what? He's done it enough times, and he really is a nice, genuine person, and I felt him like almost guiding around it, but yeah, it was nice and raw, which is exactly what I wanted. It just felt in the end like it was just two, bootnecks just having a chat about stuff and then spinning some dits. Yeah, I liked it. Yeah, I liked it.
Were there any questions that you didn't get around to asking him?
I think I covered quite a lot of it. There were a couple of parts during the podcast which you no doubt will have picked up on, where I was like, oh, I really wanted to speak about this, so I'll try and squeeze it in at the end.
Yeah.
And I think that was around a little bit of philosophy. So, like, I'm really into like Stoicism, and I suppose like the whole theme of maybe why this whole series is kind of come about is exploring the role that obstacles have to play in that creative process, But I think I think I covered everything that I really wanted to cover. I think some of the I think some of the key takeaways that I'm certainly going to come away with is there's a part during it where I think one of the pet peeves that I've always had with I suppose it's a mixture of that kind of veteran mindset or that bootneck mentality of just get it done and man up, and there's obviously an element there of like toxic masculinity, and that's a case of, you know what, we're going to see this goal, stacks of smoke straight down the middle for our reg friends, and just cracking on. But Richard really like highlights the fact that a lesson that he learned in a long time was to realise when that ship is sinking, and to realise, yes, you do need an element of that get up and go and just, one foot in front of the other lads, let's crack on. But you also need to know when you have when that trying to flog a dead horse, really, and this idea is not going anywhere. Now we should recoup and then go for another one. So I talked about a couple of coping mechanisms that I maybe use, which are like your red flags, which you'll hear me no doubt sing praises about all the time as to when I know things may or may not have gone wrong. But yeah, he has a real interesting take on it. Lots of love for Gravity Industries. Big thanks to Richard, to his team, to everybody who kind of like made this happen. It's real good. And just to remind again, not that he's asked me to, but I don't even think this was out when we had the podcast, but really do get into taking on Gravity, and really, if you feel like it, it is such an inspirational kind of matter of fact look at how people do amazing things with ideas. It's to see it through. And yeah, feel free to show your appreciation to him as well. Give him a follow, give him a like, share this podcast. If you like it, let me know what your thoughts were in the comments. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to the next one. Brilliant. That sounds good, yeah?
Mhm.
I think we're done.
You
Oh,
could,
I
like,
didn't press record.
You could like now you could like keep it recording while she like sliding all the kids' toys back.
Behind the scenes.